All right, how's this? Can you hear me now? How's that? 24 people are watching as we speak. Hopefully we've got audio now. Just checking that you hear me. Sorry about this. This is obviously not a great start. Good now. Okay, fine. All right. Welcome, guys. So this is this is the live chat as promised. I am really happy to be hanging out with you here, and we're going to be talking about language learning. Of course, I'm here to answer all of your questions, whatever they may be. And I'm going to start off by telling you about my secret summer project, which I've been teasing you with for the last few months, I guess. And I think I've actually revealed it a few times. And depending on whether you read my emails or you follow me on my podcast or YouTube, you probably already know what it is. So, you know, it might not be that big a surprise. So we will see. We will see what happens. Now, let me see who we got on here. Let's see if we can see you guys. I'd like to see some names and see who we've got. Jared, hey, hi Leela, Paul. Francisco says no sound. Francisco says it's working now, fantastic. Alicia, Michael, Luke. Luke said this happened to me the other day and I had the wrong mic selected. All right then. Let me know where you are, guys, in the world. I think I know where some of you are. I think Luke's probably about 50 miles north of me or west of me. Jared is about 8 hours west of me by plane. Let me know where you guys are in the world. And whilst you're all coming on and chatting, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up as well. There's a thumbs up sign, and I can see 7 of you have pressed that. So I think what I should be doing on a YouTube live is telling you all you guys to press that thumbs up button. All right, so here's my plan for the summer. Jared says he's in North Haven, Connecticut. I don't know where that is, but it sounds great. Okay, so I am this summer learning Italian. There you go. But I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. As you may know, I've been like experimenting. Well, I always experiment with a lot of different methods to learn languages. And in the last few months, the last year, but in the last few months especially, I've really been, everything's been changing for me. And I've just been finding that the new approach that I'm using to learn languages is just so powerful. It's kind of blowing everything out of the water. And it's interesting to watch that happen, you know? And it's interesting to kind of observe what it means for my own learning, but also what I teach. Because I don't know whether you've noticed this stuff now, but I tend to, because of what's happening to me in my own learning, like I tend to kind of, you know, when I get asked questions, that also is going to like affect the answers I give. So yeah, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn Italian, and I'm going to give myself, I don't know exactly how long, either 2 months or 3 months to do it. And at the end of that trip, at the end of that project, I'm going to travel to Italy, and I'm going to get myself tested in the language to see what level I'm at. Now, I don't really believe anymore in the idea of like the kind of like a fixed term, a short term language project with testing at the end to kind of demonstrate, like, here's how far I've come, blah, blah, blah. I think that's not very helpful. But in the case of Italian, I've got a very special motivation for learning, which is that here in London, there are so many Italians, and they're all super cool. And I really want to be able to speak. I also speak good Spanish and French. So I don't think it's not going to be as difficult as, say, learning Japanese was. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to basically put this method that I've been using and kind of developing to the test. And I'm going to see as much for myself as for anybody else where it takes me exactly. All right. And so the plan is, for the first month, I am going to do nothing but read and listen. I'm going to be finding stories in Italian. I'm going to be reading and listening to stories. That's all I'm going to do. So it's going to be 1 month of input, pure input, pure and simple, no funny business, no speaking. I'm not going to speak a word of Italian. I mean, I might talk to myself, but I'm not going to be taking lessons, doing speaking sessions, anything like that. It can be pure input. So the big question, interesting question for me is, after 1 month, when I do open my mouth and talk, what am I going to be able to say? That's going to be very interesting for me to see what happens. So month 1 is going to be nothing but input, lots of reading and listening to stories. And then after 1 month, I'm going to start speaking, and I'm going to obviously record all of this and document all of this. And so the most interesting experiment or moment for me is going to be after that 1 month point. What can I actually say in a conversation? How well can I hold my own? Right. 2, probably then start a lot of speaking. So it's going to be just a lot of like daily speaking with people, IWTYAL lessons, probably meeting people and speaking as much as possible, trying to activate the stuff I've learned. And then month 3, we'll probably be taking lessons to try and refine, iron out some creases, and you know, like perfect some grammar, maybe get some more, just some feedback on what I'm saying. So that's the general plan. What I don't really know at this stage is exactly how I'm going to kind of document it all. That I haven't figured that out yet. So I'm going to be asking you guys for some suggestions for exactly how to document this, because obviously there's going to be some video involved. I'm going to try to video as much as I can, but you guys don't want to sit and watch me reading on video for a month. That's going to be boring as hell. So I'm not quite sure what to do, not totally sure what to do about that. So if you've got any like suggestions on how I can best kind of document this process over a few months, go ahead and type it in, and I'll go back and have a look. All right, so I'm going to start like looking through your questions now and answering questions. So if you do have questions, now's the time to go ahead and type them in, and James here is going to feed me through the questions that are most interesting. We've got a lot of people on here, and the box is scrolling like this, so I can't keep up with everything. But yeah, it'd be interesting for me to have your questions, and also any ideas you've got for how to document this Italian project. That would be fantastic. All right then, so questions then. First question is, how often do you have to repeat those reading and listening sessions over the same material? Good question. There's no exact number, but a lot is the basic premise here, right? So the whole basis behind an input-based method is that you're not trying to learn a grammar rule and then perfect it and then move on and use it. That's not the idea. The idea is that you're going to read a lot, listen a lot, get exposure to the grammar, see the grammar being used naturally, see the vocabulary being used naturally, yeah? And then over time, that starts to sink in and you start to know it naturally, instinctively, whatever adjective you want to use there. And so the way to do that is through lots of repetition. You can get repetition in lots of ways. What most people do is they take a rules-based approach, they memorize lists of words, they practice grammar points, and they repeat those exercises over and over again. I prefer to take the material and repeat the material over and over again, right? Because that's the most natural and fun way to do it. So with more advanced, I haven't done this method myself as a beginner, so I'm not totally sure. But certainly when I'm doing more advanced Japanese stuff at the moment, I mean, I'm listening to certain articles like 40 or 50 times. I mean, it's a lot. You know? I mean, basically repeat it until you feel like you really know it. And sometimes you might leave a week, sometimes you might leave 2 weeks, or just one day. You know, lots of repetition. So Mikhail's, I'm not sure if it's Michael or Mikhail, says, "Hi Olly, how did you learn languages in college? I'm very busy reading scientific papers and doing lots of homework. It takes all my mental capacity and stops me from learning my beloved German." Yeah, Mikhail, I didn't do languages at college. That's the number one. That's number one. I did music, and so it was in my free time. So when I think back to it, what did I do? You know, the main languages I learned at college were French, Spanish, Portuguese, and I was lucky that I had lots and lots of friends who spoke those languages. So a lot of my method, a lot of what I did was I actually, at the time, I worked through these basic kind of teach yourself type books to get a basic idea of the grammar. And I would I'd have my verb tables and stuff like that. But the key thing was that I would then go out and just practice it. And, when you get to do one thing a lot, you get good at that one thing, right? So in the case of these languages, like, I'm not particularly good writing any of these languages. I couldn't write a paper in any of these languages, but I'm good at speaking because that's what I did a lot of, right? So basically, in college, when I wasn't working or practicing the piano, in my case, I was out with my Brazilian friends playing bossa nova and speaking Portuguese every day. That's kind of what it takes, Question number 2 here. Didn't catch the name, but it was, how did you master all of the kanji? I didn't, and I haven't. It is a work in progress. I have been through a few phases of learning kanji, which are Chinese characters in Japanese, for those of you who don't know. When I was in Japan, I studied quite a few, and I just did it the old-fashioned way. I was looking at kanji. I was copying them out by hand many times, just like the kids do at school, and that's how I learned my kanji. And then through a lot of texting with friends. So, well, technically speaking, in Japan and Japanese, email, because on their phones they have email, not text messages. So I'd be, I'd be emailing back and forth with people, arranging to meet, deciding what to do. So I'd be learning characters and then using them in writing. So yeah, but that's what got me to this kind of communicative kanji, I guess I'd call it. But I would only know, say, 500 or 600. I can't read the newspaper in Japanese. A couple of times I've been through phases of trying to learn more Chinese characters. I'm really not a kind of sit down, study kind of person for months and months and months on end, which is a challenge that you have with learning Chinese characters. It's just not my personality. I like to be out there speaking with people. So it's, this is something that's a big challenge for me, and I have to work on. I think I'll get there eventually. But, like anything else, it's just a question of priorities. So Junhao Wang says, how did you practice tones and pronunciation in Chinese? Well, I don't speak Chinese, but I do speak Cantonese. And how did I practice tones and pronunciation? Listen and repeat, listen and repeat, listen and repeat. Cantonese has more tones than Mandarin Chinese. A lot of people say it's difficult. I personally have never found tones particularly difficult in Cantonese. I find pronunciation more difficult because I find that in Cantonese, for example, you've got lots of vowel sounds and consonant clusters, which don't have in English, so I can't hear them particularly well. So, like, even simple words, like the difference between like some and some, like sometimes if I'm not paying attention, I can't catch that, or it's somewhere between. But the basic answer is paying a lot of attention, being endlessly curious to identify the words, and then repeating them. And the obvious other thing to say as well is always practice the tone with the word. So you don't do these things in isolation. So whenever you're practicing or reviewing vocabulary, it's always with the tone. So let's have a couple of questions about Italian here, because this is what I was speaking about before. So questions about Italian. Question here, what are you going to read in Italian? This is from Changing Scripts. What are you going to read in Italian? Are you going to include reading Italian music? That would be fun. Yeah, so actually a couple of weeks back, I recorded the video with Gabriel Weiner, the guy behind Fluent Forever. It's on the YouTube channel. You can go and find it. And the whole video was about, can you learn Italian through opera? Now, you probably don't know this, especially if you haven't watched the video. I'm a massive opera fan. I love opera. I listen to opera all day long on my beautiful headphones as I'm working. And so for me, Italian, I love the people, but I also love the music. I also love like Italian popular song, the kind of things that you might get like Andrea Bocelli singing, for example. So I'm going to be using a lot of music. I'm going to probably learn to play some songs, reading the lyrics of opera. Although there are some issues there, as I talked about with Gabe, because with opera, like, you've got some archaic forms of Italian. So I'm definitely going to integrate lots of music. Yeah. So Nick says, I'm also just starting to learn Italian. I already speak Spanish. So my question is, will you transfer existing language skills into Italian or try to ignore your knowledge? It's a problem for me. Nick, this is a fantastic question. And actually, I wanted to mention this before because, so one of my criteria here for judging my success in Italian is going to be how can I separate it from my Spanish. If I rock up after 3 months and I'm speaking, what do you call it? Spanalian, like a Spanish-Italian fusion, that I will deem that a massive failure. Okay, so I'll definitely be aiming to keep Italian totally separate from Spanish. It will be interesting to see if that rebounds and ends up messing up my Spanish. I won't know till I come to it. I certainly know that in the past, when I learned Portuguese, that really messed with my Spanish. And I had to go back and actually then practice using Spanish and Portuguese at the same time. Muchas veces estava en un club, num bar com uns espanhóis e de repente eu tenho que falar português e tocar entre as duas línguas. So I kind of got used to going from Spanish to Portuguese and back again, but I actually had to practice that facility. Like, I found that like learning to keep Spanish and Portuguese separate was almost like learning a new language. It's very interesting. All right, more Italian questions here. During the Douglas asks, hi Douglas. During the first month for only listening and reading, do you intend to allow yourself to occasionally imitate the speakers you listen to? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think the point of this is like it's not that I'm gonna zip my mouth shut and not speak at all. It's that, you know, I'm quite intentional about my study. Right? When I sit down to study, I know what I'm doing. It's typically just one thing. All right, so that activity will not be a speaking session where I have a session with an italki teacher and just speak. I won't go out and do language exchanges, but I'm sure I will imitate stuff if, like you say, Douglas, if the mood strikes. Yeah. This is not about like being very, very restrictive. It's about being intentional. Yeah. Nerve says, where would you get the reading content? I will be using my own books of short stories for beginners. And I don't know if I've got the link here. I probably can't pull it up. Maybe I can pull up the link here as I'm talking. But yeah, I have 2 books of Italian short stories for beginners. And obviously when I was creating those, I had a lot of help from native Italian speakers. So I haven't actually I haven't studied those books, if you like. So I'm actually, I mean, obviously I've spent a lot of time with them, but I haven't studied them in the same way that a learner might study them, right? So I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm going to put a link here for the Italian books in case you're not familiar with them. I've put a link there in the chat, guys. So I'm going to be using those books. After I finish the beginner content, I'm going to be moving on to my intermediate books of Italian and using those. I know it's a bit weird to say you're going to be studying with your own material, but like I find it super cool. I mean, obviously I already know the stories inside out and back to front, but that's good in a way because it helps you to focus on the language. So I'll be doing that. Once I finish with the beginners, I'll be moving on to the intermediate version and then on to Italian conversations, which I'm sure many of you guys already know. I'll put a link in here in case you're not familiar with that. IWTYAL.com/conversations. We have Italian for conversations as well. That's more intermediate level, right? So I'm gonna, I mean, within the 3 months, well, within the first month, I'm definitely gonna aim to work up to using some pretty solid intermediate content. You know, because I think given my Spanish knowledge, I will probably be able to cope with it. The interesting thing is going to be, like, one thing is being able to understand it or read it. another thing is being able to speak it. So that's why, like in month 1, it's just all about input, and then month 2 will be very heavily focused on speaking. So Beverly, good point. Oh, she's talking to someone else. Okay. It's practicing speaking that we need, especially if we're living in an isolated situation. Right, exactly, Beverly. So yeah, I mean, I'm in London. It's not an Italian, it's not Italy. There are lots of Italians around, but I think most likely, I do have some Italian friends here, but most likely what I'll be doing is speaking, a lot of speaking sessions on iTalki. So that, you know, Beverly, if you are in an isolated situation, you know, through the magic of the internet, the same way that you're watching me right now, you can get a lot of speaking practice in the language you want. So I'm going to try and mix it up. I'm going to try and do as much face-to-face as possible, just because you know, it's kind of motivating. But yes, all right then. More Italian questions. I want to see some Italian questions here. Okay, this is an interesting one. Namste says, everyone talks about how to get better at speaking, but how do you get better at writing? I find it so much easier to speak Japanese than to produce text. Yeah, well, they're totally different skills, you know. Writing is really hard. The thing is that most people don't have to be able to write. And so typically the people who get good at writing, they have to do a lot of writing. So you will become good at writing, for example, if you are a journalist, or you are an academic, or you're a blogger in that language. You have to, and you have to actually have to produce written text a lot. You know, if you never really have to do it, then you're going to struggle to find the motivation to do it enough to get better. Like anything, like it's like if you don't want to speak, you don't have the motivation to speak. You're not going to do it enough to ever improve, right? The only way to get better at writing is to read. The only way to get better at writing is to read. Just in the same way as the only way to get better at speaking is to listen. Fundamentally, right? Because unless you know the language that you're trying to produce, how can you produce it? So if you want to become a good writer, read a lot. I mean, that goes for, I mean, you know, is it Stephen King said that? Stephen King said, to write is heavenly, to edit is divine. That's one of my favorite quotes. But there's another famous quote about writing, which is the best way to become a writer. We're talking about novelists here, right? But the best way to become a writer, a good writer, is to become a good reader. Read, read, read. All right. Last Italian question, and then I'll go back to the general questions here. All right. Denise says, hi, Olly, how are you? Currently, I'm learning Italian through English. Cool. Do you think it's a bad idea since I have Portuguese as my mother tongue? I do that way because I keep studying English. Bon. I don't think it matters really, Denise. I mean, I think the thing is that given that you already speak Portuguese, you probably understand quite a lot of Italian. So my main advice for you is going to be just start doing it only in Italian as soon as you can. Get my books of short stories, read them. There's no English in there. It's just Italian. If you're more advanced, pick up a copy of Conversations, listen to the Italian. Like once you kind of get through this beginner stage in Italian, like you just don't need to use another language anymore. Like your main aim should be just to immerse yourself in Italian. Again, it's because you're a Portuguese speaker, they're so close. You know, you really, there's no good reason not to do that, I think. All right then, so what am I up to these days? Guess I should show you a little bit before I answer some more questions. I had a very cool session yesterday. I'm going to show you as a picture. We're just about to release German Uncovered, which is our German beginner program. Really, really excited. And I was, see if you can see this here. I spent the day with Kirsten. Can you guys see this? It's on my phone. I know it's not great, but the lovely Kirsten Cable. And we were doing some filming in a studio here in London, which was really cool. And we were recording some videos for German Uncovered. If you guys, by the way, if anyone's interested in this German program, you've got it. I'm only emailing people on the notification list, so you have to go to germanuncovered.com sharpish and sign up for that, because otherwise you won't hear about this. Okay? I've also just started working on Italian Uncovered. This is really, really cool. I'm working on this with Martina, who is a fantastic Italian teacher and a wonderful person. And we just started working on the Italian version of this course. So these are all beginners courses where you can learn the language through story, which is exactly the method that I'm going to be using for Italian. So like, I'm really happy to be able to develop this out. Like, I'm really happy to be able to kind of just be able to demonstrate like how I'm doing it with languages, and also then create the kind of programs that that will allow you to do the same thing with some guidance from me. I kind of feel like I feel like I've really found my direction, if you know what I mean, with that. So German Uncovered, Italian Uncovered. We've also got a secret project, which I can probably reveal in August, I think. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. So I really can't wait. I've been teasing you guys for years about this. Can I give you a hint? I'm not sure how I can give you a hint without giving the game away. Let's just say that before long, you will be walking down the high street and see my face. Sounds creepy, doesn't it? That sounds really creepy. I don't think I'm going to bother trying to give any hints because it's not really going to work. Yeah, all right then. So Danny says, hi Ollie, I'm currently in Austria trying to learn German. Do you feel it would be more beneficial to take German classes with a group in a physical location or take one-to-one lessons on italki? Daniel, I would steer well clear of the group classes. I think there is only one benefit to taking group classes, which is the social aspect. You know, if you are in Austria and you want to make friends, then by all means, go to some group classes. Although, of course, the trouble is you're going to make friends with foreigners and you're going to speak English. So instead, what I would suggest you do is take italki lessons, and or come and join us in German Uncovered, because that's what it's for. And then go and sign up for classes doing other stuff like yoga or salsa dancing, because then you're going to meet German speakers and you're going to practice your German. That's that's what I would do every day of the week. One-on-one lessons, one-on-one language lessons, and then go out and do classes in other topics in the language you're learning. Make sense? Wesley says, what do you do when you can't find much interesting content to listen to in your target language? Wesley, I've so rarely found this to be a problem, honestly. I think whatever language you're learning, there is interesting content out there. There really is. I mean, just take YouTube. I mean, how much stuff is there on YouTube for every language? Now, the challenge you run into is when you actually want the text and the audio. That's when you have trouble, right? I'm doing my best to create stuff, but obviously it's not a huge volume of stuff. So, you know, this is the kind of situation where it can be a very good idea to spend a little bit of money and hire someone to help you transcribe content, for example. So let's say you find a series of videos on YouTube that you love in the language. All right, it might cost you, I don't know, $50 or something. But then you get someone to transcribe it, and then that's your study material for the next 6 months. You know, it's like the cost of one lesson with a teacher, and you've got all that content there. So I really think that kind of investing in yourself in that sense and hiring people to produce content for you is wonderful. Also, you could try reaching out to other people on the blogosphere, if that's still a word, who like go into my Facebook group, go into the Olly Richards Fluency Mastermind, say, hey guys, I'm learning X language, but I just can't find any content. I like this kind of stuff. What can you recommend? People will come in and recommend you stuff. So definitely try that. All right, let's try some rapid fire stuff now. Bank Clash says, how to overcome the curse of the native speaker? In other words, everyone just wants to speak English without exchanging their own language. Yeah, massive problem. Number one, just stop expecting people to speak to you in their language and organize events organize situations where you can do it. So properly organize language exchanges. So go on to conversationexchange.com, find someone who looks serious, have sessions with them, and make it very clear from the beginning that you want to do half the time in your target language, half the time in English. Also, go onto italki and get a tutor. They can be super cheap, like $5, $10 an hour. Spend a little bit of money, get that one-on-one time with the language. I think whenever you try and just get this can be particularly frustrating if you actually live in the country as well, right? Because you have this feeling like, I'm living in the country, but everybody's speaking to me in English. It's the way of the world. As native English speakers, we have so many advantages in life. We also have one massive disadvantage, and it's what you've mentioned. So we have to hedge against that by carefully organizing opportunities to speak. Right, changing scripts. I've already asked a question, so I'm going to move on to someone else. Zach says, in one of the language books I'm reading about language learning, which is called Success with Foreign Languages, it advises you to act like a baby and throw out your mother tongue, i.e. become an empty vessel. Do you think that would be a good method? I mean, I don't know how to interpret that piece of advice, really. I mean, if the advice is like empty your mind out and just immerse yourself in the target language, yeah. If what they're trying to say is that your mother tongue is useless and dangerous, then I say no. Contrastive analysis, as it's known in linguistics, is hugely important. I mean, our biggest frame of, whenever we set out to learn a new language, our biggest frame of reference is our existing language. Yes? And so much of what we can learn comes from contrasting our language with the language we are studying. You can learn a huge amount by, learning German, for example, and noticing that, okay, in this sentence it's kind of similar, but the verb's at the end. Well, that's interesting. And so once you kind of know intellectually that in English the verb comes here and in German it moves to the end of the sentence, then you can use this facility you have to think and to analyze, to notice other features of language as well. And so this is why adults are better language learners than children, because we have these study skills. So yes, immerse yourself in the language. Yes, listen and read without worrying if you can understand. But also, do go in and use your intellectual faculties as well, because they're a good thing. Jared, hey Jared, how you doing? Oh, very specific question here. Politeness registers in East Asian languages, especially concerning pronouns, I find quite intimidating. Yeah. Like in Japanese, you have so many different ways of saying you, from omae to kimi to anata to anta to, and lots of honorific ones. As a visible outsider, should I just stick to a narrow set of pronouns? General advice on this? Listen, I think the most important thing is you're never going to come across as rude. As a foreigner learning that language, if you make a mistake, no one cares. So generally, what I would do is avoid, if it's East Asian language, you want to avoid the casual, because casual is often rude. It's much more neutral is often the polite form. So I would stick with the form which is polite without being honorific. Don't speak in honorific forms, because that's just silly. Just use the way that you would talk, whatever form is appropriate in the language you're learning to speak to an adult that you don't know. That's what you can use. And then beyond that, I just simply wouldn't worry about it, because if there is a problem, you'll very quickly find out. Luke says, do you have any difficulty going between Japanese and Cantonese in terms of kanji? So he's asking, okay, so Chinese characters exist in Japanese and in Cantonese. Do you have any difficulty in terms of pronunciation? No, because when I'm thinking in the language, I don't see the character, which might be a bad thing, but both of these languages I've learned quite orally, so there's no interference there for me. So changing scripts, this is a good question. If your goal with language is to speak it with people, why are you focusing on reading for input? Because although my goal is to speak it with people, it's not necessarily to speak it right away, right? Because the implication of that question is, if you want to speak with people, then why not start speaking from the beginning? The answer is because when you're speaking with people, if you're getting all of your input from conversations, I mean, that's great and it works. It's how I learned my languages before, but it's a very limited amount of input, right? Now, you know, when you have conversations, you can only, I mean, for a start, you can't be talking that much over the course of a day. I mean, how, you know, even if you have a language exchange, you might only have 1 hour of speaking. So that's limited for a start. So what are you going to do the rest of the time? But also, you know, having conversations when you can't really speak the language, I mean, you kind of like lever yourself up gradually. You learn phrases, you gain some confidence, yes. But it's a very, very short-term solution. And the problems that I've run into in more difficult languages that I've learned is that while, like, for example, with Arabic, when I lived in Egypt, I spoke and spoke and spoke. So I got to a kind of conversational level, but my listening sucked. Couldn't understand anything. I couldn't understand very much, and I certainly couldn't read. And so what happens is this kind of gives you this glass ceiling beyond which you can't progress. So my whole approach with this, and why I find it so powerful, is because by having an input method based on reading and listening, what you're doing is you're flooding your brain with knowledge and resources and assets. So then when you do come to speak, you've just got all this at your disposal, like a huge arsenal of weaponry that you can just spray everywhere. Right. Nora says, what's the reason of no speaking at all for your first month in Italian? She says that speaking can accelerate the process, in my opinion. Yeah, well, I mean, listen, part of this is an experiment, right? So part of this is for me to have this kind of, I mean, let's say I was doing speaking and listening, and then I record a video at the end of the month. How much of that is down to speaking? How much of that is down to input? Who knows? Can't say, right? So part of this for me is an experiment to see that if I just do reading and listening for a month, what's going to happen? That's what I mean. That's the question I want an answer to, right? But then in month 2, I'm going to go straight into speaking a lot anyway. So it's coming. I don't see it as a problem. There's no rush in that sense. Okay, more questions here. Nick says, I'm pretty confident in Spanish, and I've dabbled in Brazilian Portuguese. Any tips on differentiating them? Yes. I mean, so I answered this a little bit earlier, Nick, but basically what I've found is that you've got to take one language at a time and keep them totally separate while you're learning, right? So basically, when you decide to take on Brazilian Portuguese, put Spanish in a locked box, in a cabinet, lock it shut and don't touch it, and then just focus on Portuguese so that you can immerse yourself in that world, right? Then, once you feel like you're confident in Portuguese, you can take Spanish back out of the locked cabinet, and that's going to kick up a whole load of problems for you. But that's a good problem to have, because then your next challenge is learning to then use them both concurrently, right? That's what I would say. So Zach says, do you have packages coming out with conversations, like any bonus material? I missed out on the last promotion. I'm kicking myself in the bum for missing out. Zach, what did we do for conversations last time? When we launched conversations, it was just a cheaper price. We also had a special offer to get all 6 languages. So I don't know whether what you're asking is how can I get all 6 languages. If you're interested in getting all 6 languages for conversation, drop me an email and we'll work something out. If you're referring to another promotion, I can't remember what it was. You have to remind me. So changing scripts also says, lots of questions for changing scripts. I'd like to know your real name. That'd be cool. Are you going to listen to any podcasts in Italian? Ooh, that would, yeah, I'd like to. So I haven't thought too much about it yet. I think one of the things I'll probably do is go out and ask for recommendations for resources, because we've got such a wonderful community of people here. And if any of you guys if any of you guys are not in the Facebook group, then do come over. I'm going to try and type this in here. If any of you guys listening, maybe you came from an email and you're not in the Facebook group, go over and join the Facebook group, because we have such wonderful people, and there's a great community of people in the Facebook group, and I plan to ask people for lots of resource recommendations as well. So yeah, I'll definitely listen to podcasts, particularly if I can find some story-based podcasts in Italian. That would be wonderful. John says, if I was to book a session on italki, would it be difficult to get them to keep talking in Arabic, modern standard Arabic? Well, no, but make sure that you pick a tutor who says that they teach modern standard Arabic. The thing is, John, like the thing about Arabic is that, although my advice to anybody learning Arabic pretty much would be, if you're living in a country like Egypt or Libya or wherever, that learn the local dialects. But the reality is that most people around the world learn modern standard Arabic, because it's just, the done thing. So most teachers, if they're worth their salt, will be perfectly able to speak to you in modern standard Arabic. You just got to make it clear, basically. Okay. Any more questions? It's been super fun hanging out with all you guys. It's great to see such familiar names here. John, Nora. Nora, you sent me some such wonderful emails. It's so cool to hear about your successes. ちなみに日本語はどうですか？楽しんでますか？ノラさんは。ちょっと教えてください。Luke, Jared, Douglas, Wesley, Michael. Great to see all of you guys here. I don't see any last questions here, so I think we're coming up to the 45-minute mark, if we don't count the 2 minutes of silence. Okay, do have a few more questions here. So Michael says, been having regular speaking practice on italki for over a year, still having speaking anxiety with pauses, stammering, blanking on words. How do I overcome this? Michael, you just got to keep going. I know that's not a great answer, but it's the truth. These things, becoming comfortable and speaking fluently and with confidence, it comes from doing exactly that. All right, so don't just keep it up. The worst thing you can do is to stop, because you kind of start to undo all the progress you've made. So regular conversations, at least twice a week, ideally more. And if you feel like something is just not working, then more inputs and more listening and reading. All right, because that's what's going to feed your growth in knowledge in the language. Nicholas says, just recently subscribed to your channel. Cool, Nicholas, good to see you here. Thanks for dropping by. Let me know what languages you're learning. Lily says, which one is easier at learning in your opinion, Japanese, Chinese, or Korean? They're all the same. They're all difficult, to be honest. So you pick the one that you're interested in. Alicia says, I keep struggling sticking to one single language to learn. Somehow I lose the interest and continue learning another language. Got any tips? Alicia, double high five. You are officially a polyglot. What can I say? I think really, for me, I found that the satisfaction and progress that comes from sticking with one language is so immense when you start to see that progress coming, that, once you see what's possible, that kind of motivates you to keep going. Make sure that you're doing things that hold your interest in the language. So if all you're doing is studying by yourself, then yeah, you might get bored. So arrange some speaking sessions or conversation exchange. Interact more with the people. You've got to find that thing that's going to hold your interest, because at the end of the day, the only thing that we have as language learners is our motivation. It's all that we have. It's the be all and end all. It really is. You've got to find that thing. And I think for those, it's like a lot of you guys, I don't know if you guys are, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are, but if you're not, like a lot of your questions here have been a bit like how do I how do I become more confident in my speaking? How do I find my motivation for the language? How do I stay consistent? How do I learn speaking? Like, guys, if you've been learning for a while, you have to start speaking. Now, don't make the mistake of confusing this with what I was saying about Italian earlier. You don't have to start speaking when you first start a language. But once you've been learning for a while, you've got to start speaking, otherwise you'll never be able to speak. So go to iTalki. I'm putting a link in the box here. This is an affiliate link of mine that will take you to iTalki. It will give you $10 of credit if you sign up. So I full transparency, I do get a commission. It's about $10 if you click on that, if you sign up through that link. But you get $10 worth of free credit for signing up through that. So you can use that to take a couple of speaking lessons in the language. So that's there for anybody that wants it. Because everybody find there are a few things in the world of language learning that change everything for you. One such thing is starting to speak. Right? So if you don't currently speak your target language, honestly, turn me off right now. Click that link, go over to iTalki, sign up, book some lessons, some speaking sessions. It will change your life, I guarantee. Stephanie asks, so Stephanie is changing scripts, cool. What came first, your YouTube channel, podcast, or learning materials? The YouTube channel came first, alongside my blog. That was back in 2013, when I knew literally nothing. And then I guess it was, what was it, like 2 years later, I started the podcast. And then just more recently, like my work has been more focused on the materials. Now, Nicholas is just starting to learn French, living just south of Quebec in the US. All right, and understand while I'm visiting there. Nicholas, there is the Montreal Language Festival coming up in a couple of months. Since you live so close, get yourself over to that. I have been helping to organize it. I might not be there this year, I'm not sure. But for motivation and camaraderie, get yourself over to that event because you'll meet lots of great people and speak French in Montreal. I mean, so you're asking like tips for speaking and understanding when I'm visiting there? Not really. You just got to go. You just got to do the work. You've got to go through the process. You can learn a few, fancy phrases if you want. Doesn't really matter. I mean, really, what matters here is long term, right? So I just, I just get started with French using the method that I recommend. If you're looking for a kind of how-to step-by-step for this, I would recommend Language Learning Foundations is my course I have that basically walks you through my suggested method for learning languages. It just gives you everything on a plate in a very kind of step-by-step way. It's not free. If you want free stuff, I've got 5 years worth of articles on my blog, but this course just lays everything out for you and gives it to you step by step. So that's there if you're kind of wondering how to get started. NNS12 says how to speak Japanese fluently. NNS12, there's a pillow you can get and you sleep on the pillow, you turn it on, it speaks to you at night and you wake up in the morning speaking fluent Japanese. Highly recommended. That's a joke, by the way. NNS12, same answer for you as for Nicholas. Look, I mean, there's no quick answer. There's a lot of hard work you have to do. So I would look at the articles on my blog, or if you want something more organized, go to Language Learning Foundations, because it just lays everything out for you, and you've got to just start a serious project, which is learning the language. Nathan says, do you consider output being the result of input? 100%, no question. What else could it be? I'll tell you what it's not. What output is not is the result of how everybody in the world studies in classrooms, which is learning lists of vocabulary and grammar rules. That's not language. That's someone observing with a professor's cap on, writing down things, and then assuming that that's how you should then learn stuff. No, 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 no. That's not the way it works. Output is the absolutely the result of input. Don't forget that when you're speaking with somebody, you also get input, right? That in a conversation where you're speaking, there's a lot of input going on. It's an alternative source of input, a conversation with somebody. It's just not particularly efficient because it's not. I mean, you don't have it written down. You can't rewind. You can't go back. So, yeah. Luke says, when you first did extensive reading, do you get tired? Yes. I find about after an hour of reading in Cantonese, I can't do much more and I need to take a break. I mean, again, it depends on the language, Luke. I mean, yes, you get really tired. I mean, super tired. It's really hard work. I would even do less. Honestly, like just do 15-minute chunks or half an hour chunks. Don't push yourself. I mean, with reading in Cantonese is just like, you know, it's massively hard for reasons that you well know. Obviously, you know, if you can keep doing it and keep it up, then you'll get great results. But man, it's hard work. The real key with this, when it comes to input, guys, the key with this thing, if you're going to be using reading and listening, the key is to use stuff at your level, right? Because if stuff is too hard and it's tiring you out too much, then the material is too hard for you. It's the idea of comprehensible input. Comprehensible input being that thing, sorry, I'm losing focus now. You acquire language when you can understand the stuff that you're reading, right? Which means that it has to be just slightly above your level. People give different assessments here, but you know, somewhere between 10 to 30% of what you're reading should be unknown. That way, when you do read it, with the help of the context of everything else, you can take a good guess at understanding that stuff and learn it. Okay. Now, in reality, the practical problem you run into is finding that material that is at the right level. And that's what I'm trying to, the problem that I'm trying to address with my materials and things. Language Boost says, where do you get your haircut? Language Boost, what happens is I just get a chainsaw and I just go like that. That's how I get my haircut. I can hook you up if you want. Let's Grow Together says, do you think devouring the content of a book is too much? By devouring, I mean trying to memorize every single sentence in the book and material. So you're asking, do you think it's too much to memorize every single sentence in the book? Yes, I do. Stephanie says, do you think online tutoring and self-study materials will replace classrooms? No. Well, they won't replace interaction, because one of the key things, like self-study material can get you so far. It can give you the input you need to learn. But that's only the beginning of the road. Like everything that comes later, like moving from a kind of mediocre level to fluency and mastery of a language, the only way you get there is with feedback from somebody. So you need, at the very least, active feedback from people. Now that can be from friends or colleagues. It can also be from teachers. I mean, classrooms, in my experience, in the sense of like group lessons, are just one huge scam. And I speak as someone that taught classroom English for many years. You know, I think it's, sitting in a room with 15 other non-native speakers just repeating after me. Like, I mean, it's just so inefficient. It's an outdated model. The education system we have is based on the need of the need of countries in the Industrial Revolution to staff mass production factories. So they needed reliable, predictable outputs and outcomes from their school system. The education system we have today is a relic of that. It has no one has sat down and thought, okay, from the ground up, how do we educate our kids? How do we teach languages? If someone were to do that, if someone had carte blanche to just rewrite the education system from scratch, do you really think they would put 15, 20, 30 people in the classroom and do grammar exercises? It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. So yeah, I know. Danger of a rant there. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree what's happening on YouTube is really exciting. I mean, the ability for me to be sitting here talking to 55 people live right now, and then hundreds and thousands more over the course of the next few months, being able to sort of tell you what has worked, like just sort of package up my 15 years of experience with and tell you exactly what I've learned. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's amazing. It's a huge privilege, and I benefit from this when I learn from other people as well. And Language Boost asks, where do you get your haircut? Language Boost, if you want to learn about how to get a better haircut, which I think you probably could, because your hair is a little bit, then you could watch YouTube videos about getting your haircut. That's a hint, a tip from me. James says, James, what are you doing asking me a question here? James says, when learning a language like Arabic or Persian, do you think it's best to learn the script early on or focus almost exclusively on listening and do the reading later? Okay, good question. I think in the case of Arabic or Persian, the script is so simple, or I should say so straightforward, that it's just silly not to learn it at the beginning. It's a relatively small investment of time for just results that compounded to an insane degree on the other side. Steve Kaufman is currently talking a lot about Arabic on his YouTube channel. So definitely go and check him out and look at his videos about Arabic, because he's talking about his struggles with the scripts, like how he's been learning the scripts for like 6 months and he still can't read. Newspapers, that is, that he's trying to read, because when you write Arabic you don't mark the vowels. It's difficult. But basically the point is, if you intend to be a literate speaker of the language, if you want to be literate in the language at some point, then you've got to learn the script. So if it's Chinese or Cantonese or Japanese, that's one thing, because it's a massive task. But with Arabic, you've only got 28 letters, so you may as well just learn them. Stephanie says, fangirling a bit right now. Thank you for recommending the podcast, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. Very glad to be here tonight. It's midnight in Shanghai right now. Oh, that's cool. Can you also access YouTube in Shanghai? I thought Google stuff was blocked in China, or are you on a very fancy VPN? Let's Grow Together says, reading those languages is not simple because the vowels are often not written. Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, your ultimate aim is to learn to read, right? So you may as well start right now. Jake says, how much do you review new vocabulary? What your view of flashcards? Jake, flashcards are incredibly powerful. They really are. The thing is that I think when you say the word flashcard, people don't really, like, there are ways to use flashcards and there are ways to use flashcards. If what you do is have this kind of machine-like flipping your cards over one after the other, that's just a waste of time. But if you use my method for using flashcards, what you'll find is that they just stick in your brain. The words and the phrases stick in your brain right from the beginning. And I think, so I have a guide called Make Words Stick. I can't tell you how many people have written to me and said that this guide that I wrote about flashcards changed everything for them. Put a link here that you can check out if you like. It's super cheap. It's $7. So you might like to pick up a copy. I can't go into it now. It's too much. But basically, flashcards are incredibly powerful, but you've got to use them in the right way. Everyone has a slightly different approach for this. Language Boost has flashcard-based products. Gabe at Fluent Forever has his own system for flashcards. I have mine. Mine is the best. But those other guys are good as well. So I recommend you look at different ways of doing it. But things it's got to fit into an overall framework that you're doing, all right? And so I think flashcards used selectively to help you memorize really important words and phrases, with the emphasis being on phrases there, not words. What you can do is that you can get the stuff into your memory that you want there, and that can really push you along. Beverly says, "Wow, it's 4 a.m. Wow, where are you, Beverly? You must be in somewhere very east." Michael says, "Who's your favorite polyglot other than yourself? Who inspired you the most?" Oh, I love that question. I was actually thinking of making a video about this, but the trouble is I didn't want to cause offense by omission. I found myself following different people at different times, different stages. I do listen to other people. The person who, because you see, like, you've got polyglots who are fantastic at languages, but not very good at explaining what they do. I consider myself almost the opposite. I don't think I'm that good at languages, but I think I'm quite good at explaining language learning. I think because I've got quite a deep background with applied linguistics and teaching and stuff. For me, I spend the most time listening to Steve Kaufman. I think whatever comes out of Steve's mouth, just do whatever he says. Steve, I think, like, if I had a criticism of Steve, it's that he sometimes falls into the same trap that all of us do, which is that as we become more prolific in our language learning, we forget what it's like to be someone who's just starting out. And so one of the things I really try and do, I don't know how successfully, but one of the things I try and do is really try to be constantly aware of what it's like for a beginner, not just in a new language, but in any language, like someone who just doesn't know what it's like to go through the language learning process. And that's why I have language learning foundations, that course I mentioned earlier, because it's aimed at people that are just coming at this fresh. Like, sometimes people get that course and they email me and they say, "Well, I knew all that already." And I was like, "Okay, fine." And I refund them and I say, it wasn't right for you. But you see, for someone who has just never, the only time they've ever learned languages is at school, this stuff is totally new for them. So I try to really remember what it's like to be in that stage, right? Guido del Papa says, "Have you ever thought about taking your approach to another level? I mean, using your methodology in the current educational system to help students in schools learn through modern techniques?" Guido, I would say a couple of things. I think about it all the time, but I think firstly, I think you overestimate my reach and impact. But also, even if I did have that reach and impact, I think the education system is fundamentally doomed. The context in which and the circumstances within which teachers have to operate is suffocating. They are overworked. They have to spend more time doing admin than anything else. But the biggest problem is that the exam system forces people to teach to the test. And when you have to teach to a test, you have no options. You have to teach grammar, you have to teach vocabulary. So we will see. All right, then last question, because we've been going for over an hour now. Fernando says, hi, Olly, my girlfriend is learning Spanish. She's learning to speak with the Canarian accent, as I am from the Canary Islands. Cool. ¿De cuál isla eres, Fernando? I believe that you learned there yourself. Would you recommend our accent? I think el acento canario es el más guapo del mundo. Es como una mezcla del acento de la península y de Cuba, un poco de Latinoamérica, pero es muy suave. Lo que no me gusta del acento de la península es un poco el C y el G, eso no me gusta tanto. Tampoco me gusta muchísimo el español de Latinoamérica porque es muy, no sé cómo describirlo, pero es muy como abrupto, ¿no? Muy exagerado. Entonces el acento canario es como una mezcla perfecta de las dos cosas. So basically, I think the Spanish accent from the Canary Islands is wonderful because it's like a cross between the accent from Spain and from Latin America. So it's like the best of both worlds. So obviously, I know it's not great to lump all of Latin America together, but you know, you can kind of do that with Spanish. All right, guys, thank you for hanging out with me. It's been great. It's really great to see all of you here. I mean, I genuinely mean that. I'm going to do this much more because it's just great to be able to interact like this. So thanks for listening. If you are still here now, subscribe to this YouTube channel, please, so you get more videos. Please click a thumbs up on the video to like it, so that other people are going to see it as well. And you know, if you want more like this, most of my kind of ad-libbing like this is done on the podcast. So go over to IWTYAL and go and listen to the podcast, because I think a lot of my most real stuff actually happens on the podcast. So yeah. And Nora says, "Arigatou gozaimasu. Tanoshikatta desu." Yokatta desu ne, Nora-san. Yokatta. Kite kurete arigatou gozaimasu. All right then. Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Lily. Thanks, Nora. Thanks, Beverly. Stephanie. Paul. Good to see you. I'll see you on the other side. Now we'll go figure out how to end this broadcast. Bye, everybody.